thanks for tuning in to Facebook Live. You can also watch this video afterwards. This is going to be the first Facebook Live chat session that we're doing on purpose. I've been surprised by Facebook Live before, but we decided that it would be a really good opportunity to discuss some really pertinent topics. And so basically, to give you a little bit of introduction, is that, I'm going to give a shout out and thank you to my journalist sister who's filming this and is kind of giving me instructions on the background. My name is Kulsum Lakhani. I'm the founder and CEO of Invest2Innovate, or I2I. And we basically support startup communities in growth markets, and we've been operating in Pakistan since 2011. But what that means is that although we support entrepreneurs through an annual Startup Accelerator program, we're also building a lot of really cool investor products right now, and the very first one that we just released is called the I2I Investor Toolkit. So the I2I Investor Toolkit is basically your 101 guide to any foreign or local investor and to give you guidance, and Zahid can correct me if I'm saying anything legally, disclaimer stuff. I don't actually know what any of it means, but basically it's a 101 guide for any foreign or local investor on how to invest in the country. What we realized with our team is that we work with a lot of angel investors in the country. We talk to a lot of investors that are looking at Pakistan for the first time, and we were getting a lot of the same questions over and over again. Thinking about like what's the process for investing? How do I get my profits out of the country? Can I get my profits out of the country? And we realized there was no place to go to get the answers to that question or to any of those questions. If you go to the state bank site, some of the information is older or conflicts with what you might read at another site. And so we decided to kind of create a 101 guide that kind of doesn't have the legal jargon. It kind of breaks it down into a way that anybody can understand, but we also see it as an evolving document. So while this is actually set in stone for right now, we realize that policies can change any day, so we want to constantly update this. And we decided to do this in partnership with our law firm and our lawyer, Zahid Jamil from Jamil & Jamil. We also had contribution from Mubarak Siddiqui, who advises a lot of startups, particularly at the Nest, but he's worked with one of our startups before. So we really wanted to bring in that expertise and that knowledge. It's also really helpful when your lawyer is helping you write stuff, because he'll help you write all the disclaimers. For stuff, he's like, don't tell people this, or make sure it's not a proper guide. So Zahid, can you actually introduce yourself a little bit more in terms of your background?
Well, it's great to be here, and I'm really excited. We're doing this the first time, so for me, it's also the first time to do this. I hope it's working.
We hope you're actually watching. We're not really sure. I'm going to refresh and check as well while you're talking.
Exactly. So well, welcome everybody. My name is Angie. I'm a barrister. From England, etc. But I do a lot of work in the U.S. We have offices in Dubai, Washington D.C., Karachi, Islamabad, and we focus on the Middle East. But we have obviously historically had a very strong focus in Pakistan, whether it was inward-outward investment. By way of introduction, I've drafted tons of legislation in Pakistan, whether it's trade and transport, whether it's customs, whether it's electronic transactions, whether it's cybercrime, data protection issues, a whole host of different things. So I have a pretty good idea of how the policy space in Pakistan works, how advocacy works, and that gives you an idea of how what is to come, what is happening, and we provide advice to US-based or foreign-based entities and investors about investing in Pakistan. Sometimes they're Pakistanis who are trying to invest, sometimes it's people who are foreign companies, foreign individuals who are trying to invest. So that's the sort of stuff we do, and I'm happy to take questions. And
So just from curiosity perspective, has there been a guide like this in the past, and why is there a need for it?
I'm not aware of any guide like this. In fact, I think you're absolutely right. In a sense, I'm writing myself and other lawyers out of a job to some extent, because something like this doesn't exist. You have to go to the state bank, get that information, go and speak to attorneys, go to the Board of Investment. The Board of Investment has tried to try and put some information together. And the SECP, which incorporates corporate SEC for Pakistan, has tried to do some guides, but they're very specific to themselves. But you don't have an overall investor guide. I've never seen one, and so I think this is really helpful. And while I'm saying that, I should also mention this is an attempt, and as Kulsum said, this is not legal language. The idea was to take what I would have written in a legal format and say, let's make this easy for people to read. So again, Don't rely upon it. Get yourself get legal advice. I would always encourage you to do that because your circumstances might be different.
Yeah.
But we're trying to help out. We're trying to create an interest in Pakistan. We're trying to say, well, there are ways to invest because either someone says, well, of course I can invest and do it without caring. That's one way to do it. The other is because I know an uncle and he'll help me out. Or you,
that happens.
Yeah, exactly. Or you get so scared and don't know where to go that you actually decide, well, this is too scary for me to do. So we're trying to sort of even out that play field.
And that's exactly our our MO as well, is that we want to see success stories emerge out of Pakistan, and that means giving as much information as possible to increase the transparency, increase the ease of doing business and investing in this country. And there's so much potential, as we both know, and so many amazing entrepreneurs, so many amazing investors, right? So why don't we, as you said, even the playing field? So Zahid, before we kind of go through some of the highlights of the report, and for anyone who wants to follow along and download the report for yourself, you can go to invest2innovate.com/insight/investor-toolkit. There's a link in the event page on our Facebook. And if you are tuning in, you can like our Facebook page too if you want to. It's the Invest2Innovate Facebook page. But Zahid, when we're actually starting, can you just share maybe your thoughts on what are the biggest mistakes that investors typically make when they're investing in the country?
So we have some limited time, but I'll pick up the two most important ones, and I think this is true for not just small investors. I've seen this happen with investors who are Fortune 500, Fortune 100, where we've come in after the fact and said, why did you not get this advice earlier? So one is when money is brought into Pakistan, a lot of times the right way, first of all, getting a PRC, which is a proceed realization certificate, and I think we tried to say this there, it's like your exit visa for your money. If you don't apply for it beforehand, you're going to have a lot of problems. It's not impossible, but I would say that sometimes people have just given up. So if you are going to bring money into Pakistan with a view that you want your profits to be remitted out or your capital eventually to be taken out, you need to make sure that you have a proceed realization certificate first and foremost from the State Bank of Pakistan before you actually bring the money into the country. Now, when this doesn't happen, what investors have a problem is, well, so you invest in a company and the first maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years, there's no profit, you don't care. 5 years down the line, management has changed, people have changed, everything has changed, documents are not available. 10 years down the line, and suddenly saying, okay, now we need to remit profits, or we've been able to sell our shares. We have a great value that we've been able to acquire, and now I want to be able to convert this into dollars quickly and convert it and take it abroad. And the answer is, oops, I don't have my exit visa. And so that's one of the biggest problems we face. And regardless of where you go, the best advice you get, I would say, really focus on this issue because we've seen some very well-advised, at times, investors getting into trouble. That's one. Second, there's this great perception in Pakistan amongst many professional, I don't want to just call them lawyers, but other people, that they think that, well, if you have a shareholders agreement, you're done. The shareholders agreement has got everything inside it. The shareholders agreement is basically the main thing you need to look at. And frankly, every attorney or whoever's advising you to do that is going to charge you the most amount of money for it. I have news for you. The shareholders agreement is not worth the paper it's written on for the purposes of enforcing it in a corporate case. When you go to a company court in Pakistan and say, well, this company signed up with me saying all these things, they'll say, fine, go fight with the other investors if you want to, but we cannot enforce what is written in this agreement because it's not recognized as part of corporate process. So what does one do? The answer is not to focus on the shareholders agreement. Consider it I don't want to call it a gentleman's agreement, but okay, it's an agreement. But the most important thing is to take all that stuff and to the extent that you can, put it into your articles
of association.
Absolutely. If you put it into your charter, your articles of association, if it's in there, it's in your constitution of the company, basically, you are going to be able to enforce it. But if it's not there, it's in some signed side document. And the funniest thing is, you'll get charged this much for the articles of association, you'll get charged this much for the shareholders agreement, and so that's another problem that I think we do not be blind.
And I think when we're thinking about startups, right? Like, I mean, when we were talking about these big corporate cases, those tend to be like, private equity deals and things like that. How important is it for people at the startup level and for angel investors to think about these issues? Do you think it's really important for them?
I think it is. I think they need to know that because when they do term sheets and doing shareholders agreements and they're coming up with, products that have been designed for the US, they think it's written there, so he signed off on it, I'm good. And you don't realize, first of all, some of that stuff can't be implemented in Pakistani law, so it's out anyway. So you can write it in and if I'm being an evil or sort of Machiavellian attorney, I'll say, yeah, put it in there, just agree to it because it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. That's one way. So that's why it's very important to make sure that what you're agreeing to is actually legally possible in Pakistan, and secondly, that it's not just in the shareholders agreement, it actually is in the articles of the company.
Okay, cool. And so we also, by the way, for those who are watching, I see that we have about 50 viewers right now, which is really great. If you want to post your questions on the Facebook Live chat, we'll make sure that we can get to that. We have another 20 minutes left. The cool thing is that when we first released this toolkit with zero marketing, we got a lot of downloads. I was telling Zahid the other day, we had over 300 downloads, even though we hadn't even marketed the product properly. And so as a result, we also got a lot of questions that came to us. So we're going to start to address some of those questions that came up. So one of the main questions, and actually Yusuf Hussain, who runs Founders Institute, so shout out to him. He's a great guy, great friend, and a great investor. Had a couple questions in relation to the steps to investing in Pakistan, right? So the big question is if you are a foreigner versus a local. So local, there aren't as many steps, right? But you have to get approval as a foreign investor. That's actually in the toolkit and something that we talk about. So can you really quickly just go through like the process of, as a foreign investor, what the steps are to investing, and then we'll talk about what happens if that investor does not get approval.
So I think it's important to take this in two halves, because the first question is what is generally the process to invest in what you should do, and separately this big problem of not being approved by the Ministry of Interior, which the Ministry of Interior started, and